5% of my time is spent on music.
I am a little bit lost there.
Misplaced sense of macho. The only thing I could have brought to Judas Priest at that point was another bald man.
Which I think made me shed a tear.
Part of knowing myself is knowing what I like and what I don't like, and I just don't like doing that. I just don't. But I did.
Hello, you Metal Pilgrims, and a very special welcome on this interview, because you've been asking me, guys, to do that for a long time, and I can't believe that this is for the very first time ever. I am more than happy to welcome nobody else but Devin Townsend on the show. Devin, thank you so much for finding time and joining me. How are you, man?
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm doing all right, man. It's Friday, and it's raining in Vancouver, and that's good weather for me. So I hope to, after the interview, stay inside and write for a while.
Oh, that's nice. Writing, more writing. Man, you're about to release PowerNerd. There are 2 more projects coming out soon, and you still have to write?
Well, I mean, the way that I create has always been just based on the fact that music is my outlet to express myself and my life in general. So when I've had an experience in life, however benign or important, chances are that's the way that I've managed to find understanding of those situations, is by writing about them. Mm-hmm. So it's become a cathartic process more so than a business venture, right?
That's really interesting, because for me, on the other side, as you know, I'm in Ukraine, sitting here in Kiev. For me, music has become, an escapism in a way, right? This is my gate to normality, my gate to, something I love from the normal life, which is great.
Well, I also feel that the role of listener and artist is symbiotic, in the sense that if, as an artist, your objective is to articulate your emotional reaction to things as accurately as you can, and it's not that you're trying to become famous or you're trying to teach people or lecture people or anything like that, I think if you do that and you're honest about it, and you can remove the part of you that is trying to defend yourself, then the listener's role in it becomes based on being able to participate in something that maybe they don't have the vocabulary for. They're able to hear something that they're able to say, yeah, I relate to that. But the roles have to be pretty well defined, because I find it's very easy as artists to end up believing your own hype, So I think the way to get away from that, not only your own hype, but your, the people who don't like you, is to just avoid a lot of the things that bring other people's opinions into your work, like reading comments on YouTube or Reddit forums or whatever. So what I tend to do is I tend to be pretty insular with my process, but at the same time, that process is very firmly rooted in trying to strip away as much of my own bullshit as I can, right?
That's really interesting, because, a listener would always project music he can relate with, he or she, of course, on their own life, and view it through the prism of their own experiences and so on and so forth. And I feel like some artists, knowing that, also tend to abuse it in a way, because they are trying to, instead of being honest and projecting whatever they feel, they are trying to write whatever they think their audience will relate to the most.
As devil's advocate, though, that's an easy trap to fall into. I think that specifically in 2024, where the music industry is a ghost of what it once was, the ways in which artists can sustain their lives, and in some cases a family, requires a lot more legwork in order to find avenues to generate income, whether or not it's like having something on the side or selling coffee, or, you know what I mean? It's like the merch company often says, we're not in the music industry, we're in the textile industry. Yeah. And I think where that becomes dangerous for artists is when you become afraid. Like, maybe you have a bill, maybe your mortgage is up for renewal and the interest rates have gone up or whatever. And then you think to yourself, oh shit, what do people want from me? Because in those moments, it's much more difficult to extrapolate your current emotional state into a place that isn't going to be a risk.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of records that I've released that I think to myself, oh my God, now I'm going to have to explain this. I remember when I put out The Puzzle or Casualties of Cool or Dev Lab or The Hummer or any of these sort of experimental things that I've done, my first thought is not like, oh, I can't wait to throw this in the face of the audience because I'm being provocative. My first thought is like, oh shit, now I'm going to have to rationalize it. You know what I mean? And one thing that's very easy is just in those moments think, you know what we could really do is just, the same thing that we used to do. But it's never anybody who is invested in an artist for the sake of their authenticity is going to know you're full of shit. So you just have to have faith in your own intuition, I think.
The upside of the updated music industry of the 21st century, let's call it like that,
Sure.
is the abundance of music. And because of that abundance of music and the accessibility of it, I feel like also a listener would always value authenticity. And after a while, they can differentiate between what is authentic and what is just commercial bullshit done.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think that the onus is on the artist on some level to vet their ideas so that what they're coming at it from the point of view that they're coming at it from is one that they can stand behind. And I think that PowerNerd is a great example of a record where that was difficult because it started as the first record of a 4-record process that was essentially like me extending an olive branch to the audience saying, hey, thank you for tolerating all the weird bullshit that I do. Here's a bunch of these type of songs that I do that I had been sort of working on over the past couple of years. And as I do, I just write constantly and then categorize those things into things that are similar to it. So when I started working on it, its intent was really just kind of like a fun party record. But then we started going through and went through a bunch of shit as a family that was, exceptionally difficult, with loss and grief being a foundation of that moment. And at that point, I couldn't rationalize the lyrics that I had originally written for the music.
Mm-hmm.
And the decision ended up coming that it's like, okay, if you're working on this and you've committed to releasing it, which I had done, yet your intent for its thematic qualities has changed, you would better reevaluate. And so a lot of the difficulties of making this record, circumstances aside, were based on trying to find my truth amidst a moment where I was very confused.
I was obviously able to listen to the album a little bit earlier than most mortal human beings on this earth. And despite the whole fact, I know that you said that before, that you have rewritten it, let's call it like this, in 11 days. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Sure.
I think it's a very, very complex work. I don't think of it as a collection of party songs in any way. Quite the opposite. It is very different from. It takes you on an emotional roller coaster. You have obviously, uplifting songs like PowerNerd, for example, and then you have Dreams of Light and Ubelia, which I think made me shed a tear.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, the song Goodbye really messed me up. But I mean, I think, again, my criteria for whether or not what I'm doing is of any value to me, let alone an audience, is whether or not it's an accurate representation of where we were at. And Ubelia was, I've been with my wife for 36 years and she moved to a different town and like all these other things that had happened simultaneously. You're thrust into a scenario where either you deny what you're feeling or intellectualize what you're feeling to the point where it's an abstraction. And at that point, it's another defense mechanism. And one that I've been invested in for many years. I've been often too busy to recognize that although I can articulate what I'm feeling, my ability to do so also protects me from actually feeling it. And during the process of making it, the grief and the experience that we went through was such that I couldn't avoid it. I couldn't intellectualize it. And there was a real learning that came with recognizing that these are real feelings that you have. These aren't at an arm's length as a result of being able to articulate it. No, you're in it. And I'm grateful for that. I really am, because I think that these are human things, as we were talking about in the beginning with war and all these awful human things that are currently going on. One of the things that I believe is discouraged, which is a real shame, is like actually participating in what it means to be human, whether or not that's fear, love, sadness, grief, joy, whatever. They're beyond they're beyond the reach of words. It's hard to describe, right?
100%. You have to relive and live through your emotions to the fullest. Sometimes you need to, sometimes living through your emotions is the only way to move past them so that you can actually be strong to withhold whatever the circumstances you're dealing with at the moment. And once again, as a person in the time of war, living in the epicenter of it, I know this and I can feel it quite a lot. And this is the only way to positive.
100%.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely. But
what I was meaning to say there was the act of I guess sort of surrendering to the fact that these emotions are beyond, for me, had a very liberating effect. I think one thing that I recognized through the making this product, or this process, through the making of all these records and all this stuff, is there's a certain term for when you consciously remove emotions or attachment from a person, place, or thing in fear of its loss as a defense. I think the term's called decathect. And essentially it's like you're so afraid of somebody dying that you never fully love them. Because when they die, the pain of having committed to their to that process so fully is potentially so much more devastating. Yet, to not do that means that you've squandered the opportunity. I remember when my son was born, I remember being so afraid of him dying that it was like for the first month or two, I was like, I didn't want to surrender to what it meant to be a father. But then when I finally did, it's like to really love something also accepts that it's not permanent. And it's death is what brings meaning to it in a sense. It's like the importance of life. If it was endless, it wouldn't have the same sort of vibrance. So it's almost like the hard part of this process for me was like recognizing that in order to really surrender to loving somebody or something, I have to also accept the fact that it's impermanent. And I guess for most of my life, my fear of death was such that I didn't want to do that subconsciously, but having it thrust on you forces you to say, well, it's such a waste of time to not love somebody whom you love fully,
That's very Tolkien-esque description of life and love and the gift of death. I'm a huge Tolkien nerd, as you can see, most likely from the map behind me. But that was the prevailing line that he was, trying to articulate when he was talking about love between the mortal and immortal, especially.
That's interesting. Yeah. I didn't realize that, actually.
Yeah. I'm very much cool. Of a nerd. As you said, the power nerds, right? And I love the
power nerds, brother. Let's stick together.
I very much like by the way, the title of this and the whole concept of it, because I mean, aren't we? By we, I mean metalheads have always been kind of the outsiders, the nerds of our communities, always. So
I think so. There's that, but I also think within the community, there's this sort of misplaced sense of macho that I think sometimes can make the work and make the scene not as strong as a result. I remember, for example, like I hate horror movies. I just fucking hate them. And it's not because I don't appreciate the artistry. It's not because I don't appreciate a good story. And it's not because I'm offended by gore. It's because I don't understand the intent. I think to myself artistically, I'm not like that. So that doesn't make me right or wrong. I'm just saying I'm not like that. And those sorts of imagery, specifically things that are rooted in sadism, I think to myself, why would you make that statement? Like, what's the statement? And the answer that often comes back when I ask that is, it's like, oh, it's catharsis. And what also comes along with that is when people say, people who aren't affected by it in the same way as I. And again, I'll say it's not right or wrong. It's just different people. But people who aren't affected by that say things like, oh, you're just a fucking pussy. You can't handle that? And I'm like, no. And not only can I not handle it, I don't want to handle it. However, I still get the shit that I need to get done. And I'm still there for the people who need me. And in an emergency, I'm a good person to have around. And I can handle the suffering. And I can handle being in the hospital. I can handle this. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to exacerbate that to try and prove to myself or anybody else that my sensitivity is something that I feel needs to be overcome. It's fucking absurd. So the idea behind the Power Nerd theme is just like, listen, I know where I'm at. It doesn't mean I can't do these things, but I know who I am amidst it all, right?
And can you tell us a little bit about this relationship between PowerNerd and the Moth and the Axolotl, which will come out later? Because I am a little bit lost there, I'll be honest with you, despite the whole fact that I am a nerd.
Sure. The concept from a different vantage point is what I'm meaning to represent with these different projects. So the concept of change, I guess, is the best way to summarize what the theme is. But the concept of change also includes things like death, or kids leaving home, or the end of a relationship, or it's just change in general. And our world, as you probably know more than anybody, is just so full of uncertainty that if our expectation of life is that it's consistent and it just never changes, it's immutable, will lead to suffering that is unnecessary in some ways. And so it's almost like these three projects are meant to represent this theme of change from different vantage points to express that this is, if anything, maybe the only consistent thing about human existence is the fact that everything does change. It is all fluid. It's like you blink your eyes and you're in your 50s, and then you blink your eyes again and you're in your 70s. And, these things can't be represented by one aesthetic, in my experience, because life is fluid. Sometimes I'm in this mood, sometimes I'm in this mood, sometimes I'm here, sometimes I'm there, sometimes I'm grumpy, sometimes I'm happy. But the consistency of the theme of change exists through all those vantage points. So using this period of my life that is so full of change, it feels to me the most accurate representation of that is to view it from different lenses.
So it will be viewing the same events and the same emotions through different lenses, or it will be a timely process.
It's not the same circumstances, but I think the emotions are consistent. Yeah.
And how are you, if at all, going to bring that on the road and perform in front of the fans? Have you already thought about this?
We do the Moth with full orchestra and choir in March in the Netherlands. But the truth of it is I have 34 records now, 32 records. Even if I wanted to play one song from each record, I couldn't do it in a single show. So it provides me opportunities to compartmentalize the work into different events. Yeah. Maybe one of them is the Moth, maybe one of them is more heavy, maybe one of them is more commercial, maybe one of them is more comprehensive. And I'm willing to do that because the band that I currently work with have the capacity to do it all.
Wow.
So it's more about what the demographic is in the place that we're going, for one. What the current thing that I'm trying to hawk is the next thing. And really, I think the third component to being able to figure out how to do it live is following my own interests. Because it's like, as much as it's a symbiotic relationship between the audience and the creator, it's not rooted in like altruism, it's something that is an exchange, and part of that requires compromise, right?
But it will be a logistical nightmare to bring different projects in different towns, man.
Brother, Let me just say, and I mentioned this to a good friend of mine the other day, 5% of my time is spent on music. 95% of my time is spent on logistics. Like, and I'd argue is less than 5 sometimes.
Do you ever rethink the whole idea of releasing your music on your own and want to go back to the label or shit?
Well, I do. I rethink things in private, but I think that I've had enough experiences and enough experiences in being uh, um, impulsive that I know now that those feelings sometimes are fleeting. So I will, again, I vet the ideas in private before I bring them publicly. And that's a hard one. That's a hard one skill because there was a certain point in my life where it was almost like whatever my thoughts were, I would just say it and do it. And that leaves a swath of destruction on a personal level that is like, not particularly efficient.
When I announced in my Patreon that I'll be speaking to you, the two questions that the fans absolutely had the answer to. Number one is because, as most of the channel's viewers know, we're huge Judas Priest nerds on this show.
Awesome.
Tell us a little bit about that time when you were, I mean, not specifically asked, but considered to replace Rob Halford back in the 1990s.
I was a huge Judas Priest fan, man. Just huge. And Unleashed in the East was my favorite record. I just loved that. And Defenders of the Faith was the other one. And it was a pivotal band for me, specifically KK Downing. Like his guitar style was just so influential to me because he was so wild and out of tune and had tons of echo on it. And The Sinner and Victim of Change, it was just such a big thing. And then I went through the Steve Vai experience where I sang for him, and then I, worked with Geezer Butler and a bunch of other like these sort of the prior generation of musicians, a lot of whom were like rock stars. And I got a mail with a Judas Priest font on it saying we would like you to audition for the band if you're interested. And how flattering that was, I can't even tell you. But because of my love for the band, I said no. Mm-hmm. Because as a fan, I didn't want to see me in Judas Priest. That's really what it came down to.
In all honesty, were you afraid of filling the shoes? I mean, it's okay to be afraid. We just discussed.
I was afraid only in the way that I don't sing like that. You know what I mean? I can sing something like that, but I don't sing like that. So I knew that the problems that I'd had with my voice in terms of sustaining high notes and things like this would just make it that I wasn't as good a choice as somebody like Warrell Dane or Ripper Owens or somebody like that. And but really, and I say this hopefully with honesty, but I just really didn't feel like I was the right guy for the job. I really didn't. And I think that came from appreciating the band so much. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I remember with Steve Vai, I was running around with like a pair of pink leotards smashing fruit on my face. And I'm thinking, that's not what Judas Priest needs.
Well, as a Devin Townsend fan and as a Judas Priest fan, I very much respect that, and I thank you for that.
No, 100%. And I know Andy Sneap, and when Rob Halford was in Vancouver doing the 2 record, I was recording Ocean Machine, and we spent a bunch of time together then. And he was a great person. He was really, really kind, and so it's like my relationship with the band is based on respect, and I know how I am when people tell me what to do. It's like I'm very contrary. My wife always said if she wants me to do something, she asks me to do the opposite. And so if I was in Judas Priest and they said, we want you to dress like this, we want you to sing like this, I would probably have reacted petulantly, and it would have been good for nobody.
And the thing is, when it comes to such bands as Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, there is a certain level of expectations for the fans that
absolutely
cannot, change no matter what.
Absolutely. The only thing I could have brought to Judas Priest at that point was another bald man.
That's funny. On that funny note, I also wanted to close with another question from our patron: is whether you would consider working once again with Arjen Lucassen sometime in the future.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know him. I didn't want to do it in the first place. Not because it was bad music at all. I mean, he's incredibly talented. I just don't like doing guest things. I just don't like it. I don't like it. And so he kept asking me. He was like, "Would you do it?" And I said, "No, respectfully, I would rather not." And he came back. He said, "No, please do it." And I said, "No, really, I'm not a fan of doing these things. So I respect your work, but I would rather not." And then finally, he just asked me again. I was like, "Fuck, okay." So I just did it. But I didn't read the concept of the story. I made up my own lyrics. And it wasn't to be an asshole. It truly wasn't. It truly wasn't. I'm just part of knowing myself is knowing what I like and what I don't like. And I just don't fucking like doing that. I just don't. But I did. And I appreciate how it turned out and all that. I just, if he asked me again, I would probably say no. And it's not again because of him. I think he's brilliant. I just don't like doing it. I don't like singing on other people's things. I really don't.
I think this is.
I still do it from time to time, but usually it's because I bartered. Like somebody did something for me, so I'll do something for them.
You really do that?
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's just very also, it goes back to the whole question of honesty. And I'm sorry that I'm bringing this up again, but when you're at the age and it's certain status already, you got to be honest, not only to your fans, but also to yourself. Do you want to do this at at this stage in your career where you don't have to do anything?
Well, I don't have to. And not only that, it seems confusing to me not confusing. It seems like sometimes people can interpret honesty as arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
But when I really check my reasons for saying no to some of these things, it's because I truly don't want to do it. And that's my truth. It's not because I'm trying to say that what I do is of such value that by doing it, I'm dispensing benevolence or something. It's just I just don't like doing it, man.
Well, on this cheerful note, hopefully you did like doing PowerNerd, because I believe that it is heard in the music. It is a very honest record, and I absolutely loved it from the very beginning until the very end.
I really appreciate it. Yes, I did. It was an important record to me, and it's part of 3 important records. So I appreciate very much the support, and I appreciate very much, what you're going through where you are as well. So I wish you all the luck and potential peace that can come from a situation as awful as that. And I look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. This was Devin Townsend, everyone. Thank you so much, Devin. Keep rocking.
See you soon, brother. Bye-bye.